everybody. Welcome to another episode of the Cloud-Based Mayhem. Really excited to bring you the show. Before we get into it, just a few little items of housekeeping. Wanted to remind everybody that we've got that new Spotify playlist up, the Cloud-Based Mayhem playlist. That's just yours to grab. You can find that on Spotify. You can also find it on the website and on the Facebook feed on Cloud-Based Mayhem. And then we still got this giveaway going. We're going to keep this going to the end of the month. I've got a Flymaster Vario, a B1, a little bit older one, but it still works great. And I've got a Power Traveler spare battery. I think that's 8,000 milliamp battery that I got in the 2015 X Alps, but it's brand new, never been used. So if you need an extra battery for when you're flying or for Volbiv or whatever, that's there. And then I've also got a Noco 5 watt solar panel, which is a little light. You need a little bit more than that in my experience for proper Volbiv, but definitely enough to keep your phone up or an extra battery up for a quick little 1 or 2 day trip. Pretty lightweight, and that's brand new, and that comes with a couple different batteries. So how we're going to do that one is that rather than doing the ratings and stuff like what we've done in the past, is just spreading it via social media. So, if you spread it on a Facebook group or put it on a forum or just tell your friends, and you come up with some kind of cool little jingle or way that people will actually listen to the show and maybe get some new listeners, just make sure I know about it, and you'll be in to win one of those 3 great things. Again, I'll announce that at the end of the month. Social media, we've had a few people put their hand up to help us out with social media. Thank you so much. So I think we got the UK, most of Europe, and where else? Romania, a couple of the places covered, but I'm still looking for somebody to help us out in North America. I think Australia and New Zealand were pretty good, but just looking for somebody to kind of put, when we put up a new show, to just spread it around a little bit on the different Facebook groups and that kind of thing, the different paragliding and hang gliding and clubs. So if you want to help us do that, I would really appreciate it. It'd be a great way to support the show. And let's get into this talk. I just got a phone with Xandi. He teaches SIV, and he's a test pilot for Icaro. He teaches SIV in Gerlitzen and Icaro. Been in the game since the late 80s, has a fascinating history. Been a test pilot for many, many years. So in this show, we get into SIV and maneuvers that are really important, and how a wing becomes kind of from paper to a real product and through certification and hits the mass market. Lots of fascinating things. We don't really talk about accidents, but we talk about how to avoid them. And he's got a lot of good perspective because he's been at it for a long time. This came to us through one of our Patreon listeners. If you're a Patreon supporter, you get to put in for somebody you really like to see on the show, and I try as hard as I can to make that happen. So here is one of those. Please enjoy this talk with Xandi, straight from Gerlitzen. I think you're going to dig it. Xandi, welcome to the Mayhem. It's so awesome to have you on the show. I really appreciate your patience. It's been a couple months and we've been trying to link up and make this happen. Shout out to Warner for introducing me to you. I didn't actually put it together until recently that one of my Bibles, Acrobatics, was actually co-authored by you. So it's exciting for me to have you on the show. Why don't we start off with for those who aren't familiar with your background, because I know we were just talking before we hit record, your background's in acro and testing and being a test pilot, but take me back to your beginnings. How'd you get into flying and get us up to speed?
Hey, nice to be on your show. Thank you for the invitation.
Yeah, it's great to talk to you.
The story of my flying thing, it began when I was a little child. It's like this typical dream when a child starts to run and to see and detect things, and suddenly this dream is coming out in this child's brain, to fly, to get airborne, to feel like a bird and something. But, as a child, you don't have the chance to take off and fly. Maybe you have a father who has a paragliding school, but my daddy didn't have it. But he was a passionate radio-controlled airplane pilot. So he was totally in the construction, the airplane stuff, and taking me to the airfield every weekend where he tried out his new planes. And that was my contact actually with flying. And I also got totally into it and was making my own designs, my own radio controlled models and stuff. And then with 16 or 17, I think I was like that. Yes, my father brought a paraglider as a present, and then I took it on a hill, and I knew actually how flying is working somehow because I was with these airplanes around. And the first takeoff went well, and then I was on the beginner's hill, making my first steps with 16 or 17 with the paraglider behind the family's house. There was no flight school around or something. And
What year was this?
what year was this? It was 1986 or 1989.
Wow. So right back in the beginning. Yeah. Okay, cool.
Yeah, this was the beginning. And my mother thought it was dangerous, and she said, "No, don't make experiments with that thing anymore. Stay on the ground." But I had my motorbike, and so I hid my paraglider in the wood, and I said to my mama, "I go just for motorbiking." And then I went into the wood, grabbed the paraglider, went into the mountain, and I made my forbidden flights there. And I went to these hills where we have been before with the airplanes. We knew where the thermals were there and there. I also started to firm up with my paraglider, and everything worked out in the beginning because I had my basics already from these radio control things. And in 1995, I made the license, the paragliding license. I went to the flight school and said, "Hey, I need a license actually," because once I was landing in the farmer's field and I had no license, and he called the police, and I got in some little troubles. So,
Was this in Gerlitzen, or where were you back then?
My hometown is half an hour away from Gerlitzen, so from Gerlitzen to east, Klagenfurt, it's my hometown, and there are some hills around with 1,000 or 1,500 meters, and there I made my first steps. I also knew about Gerlitzen, but I knew also that you just can fly there if you have a license, and then so in 1993, 4, 5, I managed to get this license, and to continue with that hobby, actually. Since that time, it was just a hobby because my normal profession then was I was primary school teacher. That's what I've learned actually in the beginning, to have a normal job, But I never did it. I stuck in paragliding.
Okay, gotcha.
In 2001, 2002, I had my plan. So just like how can I live from paragliding?
Okay.
Because you need your money to stay alive somehow, and so I tried to manage this with some tandem flights. I made my first SIVs for students, and so all this started in 2002. Yes.
And so up until that point, were you still teaching in primary school?
Yes. So in that transformation period, I did both actually. Yes, and then I quit this job of teaching and stuff, and started to become a professional paraglider.
Gotcha. Cool.
Yes,
More
it was
exciting.
quite funny.
And define professional paraglider? Was it more your own personal flying, or was it more with the school and the tandems and teaching?
Yeah, you should find a mix between of earning some money with flying and otherwise spend as much time as possible in the air to get experience, to come further, to learn some maneuvers or to fly bigger distance or whatever. So it was always a mixture of learning and getting experience, but on the other hand, also working like flying tandems or teaching simple stuff in SIVs,
Okay. And were you kind of at that stage, kind of early 2000s, were you more drawn to cross country flying, acro, or kind of all of the above?
It was a mixture of everything. But these gliders, they were not so good in performance actually in these times. And suddenly I was more and more motivated when I came to cloud-based to make some maneuvers, to make a spiral or wing overs or asymmetric spiral looping, full stalls, spins, like these maneuvers what we were flying in the past when we didn't know how a SAT is working or something. And actually I got more addicted to this maneuver flying. Yes, I still also nowadays I fly cross country, but just for testing prototypes and making comparison to the other wings. But the flying acro it became more passion in 2002. Yes, and I totally got into it then in 2003.
Okay, and then so the last so 2003, 2004. I understand you started working for Icaro in 2004.
Yes, before I was flying for Independence gliders and some Wings of Change and Edel, the old brand from Markus Gründhammer. And then in 2004, I switched to Icaro, yes, and that's where I'm still now.
Okay, and how do you kind of divvy up time these days? You know, between teaching and your own personal flying, like with acro and that kind of thing, or with cross country. Did you compete as well?
I competed some national cross country competitions, but also just for getting knowledge out of my prototype and what I was working on. Because all the time when I come to the flying mountain, I have at least 2 or 3 prototypes in my car. It's like maybe a freestyle prototype, a ENB prototype, a prototype for paramotoring or beginner's wing or whatever. And so I have the plans for today. And if I need to see how the performance in full accelerated speed with my prototype is, or how is it climbing in thermals to compare it to the others. So that's why then I go to a cross-country competition to make this comparison. But I don't take a serial wing and put my flight on the XC contest, for example. I always have these prototypes where I'm working on. Yeah, nowadays it is like that. The summer is completely different to winter time. In summertime, I'm really, really busy with SIVs, and since 2 years, I have my own landing field and my own little bar at Gerlitzen. It needs a lot of time to organize that. I have 8 tandem pilots flying there for me, and during my SIVs, I also make lots of testing work. And now when autumn and winter is coming, I have a work office designing harnesses.
Wow, busy guy.
That's what I do in wintertime. Designing harnesses. The acro harness is really getting into production right now. Cross-country harness is coming next year. Beginner's harness is also coming next year. So now in the wintertime, I'm sewing a lot and making a few test sessions on the Canarian Islands to try out the new prototypes. But I'm more in the construction work in wintertime, and springtime, it's big test sessions all the time, and summer, testing, working, SIVs. Yes, no time for acro competitions anymore and nothing.
Yeah, and these days it requires so much training, doesn't it? It's tough.
I'm 41 already.
Yeah. I don't feel too bad for you. I'm 45. Goodness gracious. Time flies, doesn't it? Well, hey, you brought up a lot of things that I want to dive a little bit deeper into. But first, I don't think many of our listeners are very familiar with one, just what it is to be a test pilot, but also just how, can you kind of take us through briefly? I know there's a lot of stops along the way and there's a lot of elements to this, but what's involved in bringing a wing from dream stages where it's just a thought in your mind to a reality. And also, if you could maybe give a little bit more background on Icaro as well, because I'm not very familiar with their wings. Like what are their, what are they known for? What are their, what are their kind of one of their most selling wings?
Most selling wings is the ENB category with Icaro, so that's where they focus on, because the ENB category is the biggest market. Actually, when you want to sell gliders in a big amount, you need everything in the ENB class. You need a low ENB glider, medium ENB, high ENB. In the future, you also need 2 beginner gliders, a really slow and brave one, and another one with a more esprit and a bit more speed. So this is the main market we are working on. And all the rest, like acro and freestyle gliders, it's also a kind of market, but not a really big one. And the cross-country wings, E and C class is quite interesting, and the E and D is also a big thing for promotion and for getting good results in the big competitions. And the knowledge what you get there, you can put it also a bit into the serial class. But if you want to just sell wings, you need to focus on normal gliders, E, B, and some C gliders. Yes, and that's what Icaro is focusing on. If we bring out a new glider, it's same like all the time. The boss, the guy on the computer, so the guy who's making the buttons on the software, so the designer, and the main test pilot is sitting together and we create a plan. What do we need in our new glider? Because nowadays you should have not so many lines. Everything should be light. You should have best performance. You should have the best passive safetiness you can get out of it. And then you get the first prototype. And so when you get the first prototype, you have to calculate about 1 or 2 years of working on that project until it's ready.
Okay.
And the process is like when you get your new product out from the factory, you just lift it off in the wind and you see, is it flying or not? Of wrinkles, or is the canopy right clean? So how is the base? And then you start to work on that base to get the wrinkles out, to make the first glides, to see how it's reacting on the brake. What did the designer make with this new concept? And then you start to get to get the wrinkles out, to get a good performance, to get a nice handling. For that, you need at least 3 or 4 prototypes until this thing has a nice flying character. And then that's the big part. You have to get it through the certification. So that means that on one day I make about 30 to 50 full accelerated collapses, and in every collapse I fly close to the canopy. It's like it's really hard actually to, if you have a glider with a good character and you think that might be the taste of the pilots, what they want to have out there, the feeling what the glider gives you when you fly, to get this project also through the maneuvers. And that's then a tricky part to get the maximum passive safety and to keep the good character of the glider. For sure, you can make some loops in the triangle buckles on the risers to make it slow, and then the maneuvers might be good, but it flies like a pregnant cow or something, all the character is gone. So the really tricky part is like to find where is the glider reactive, where when I make some changes there and there, is the reaction that what I want, and can I keep the character and the good performance? And this is not working just with making loops down there. So you have to change the bands inside. You have to change the tension on the leading edge in the front. You have to put out some rigifoils or put some more in. You have to change the position of the A, B, and C lines on all the parts of the wing, in the middle, in the stabilo, in everywhere. So you have so many options, and you need to find the right way. And sometimes this costs you more than a year of just making maneuvers, collapses, changing after every flight. Sometimes you change your glider for 1 hour, then you go up again for the next flight, you land down again, you change it for 1 more hour, you go up again, and that's a testing day, actually. And at the end of the day, you are not happy. Because normally, how is a good flying day ending? With a perfect flight, But in testing, sometimes you don't have perfect flights. You just fall from the sky every time, and you get really depressed, and the designer is on the landing field watching you falling down all the time, and he says, yeah, I have a brilliant idea now what to change, and then all the problems will be gone. And you know that he isn't right, but you have to do what he says sometimes. You go up with the cable car again and think about the next flight, and farm, you crash again, or you don't crash, but you fall close to the canopy in the collapse. And sometimes it's quite frustrating to have a period of weeks where you just fall next to the canopy all the time because you cannot manage the thing with the full accelerated collapse. But then once you find a little way and you follow that, and then with the time, you get it managed somehow. And you would never expect that this pitch of a wing can also behave really, really nice. You just need to find a way. How is the wing reacting, and where is he reacting when you change something? And that's different with every model you have.
And how long, on average, would it take? I imagine it's pretty similar for all the companies. How long from, on paper to certified wing? Is that a year, 3 years?
Yeah, it depends. If I want to make a completely new product, like a high performance E&B wing where I don't have anything in my program right now, I start from zero. So that can take at least 2-3 years, up to 30 prototypes. But if I have a nice model already in my program and I just make changes, so for this and that for another version, this you can make in 2-3 months.
Okay.
That's not a
I
big
got
deal.
you.
So,
and take me through so your wing's done. You've done all the testing. It's the final prototype. You're ready to send it off to Air Turquoise or wherever you send it to get the certification. Mm-hmm. What happens there? What are the maneuvers that the wing has to go through for the certification, and who does it?
Every certification company has different test pilots. I know them all from the past. Some I know from Icaro competitions, some I know from exhibitions or something. And it's quite tricky nowadays because today we have 3 certification companies. So it's kind of a market. It got a bit like a market because in the past we just had the DHV. Mm-hmm. And everybody had to go there to get the certification. Now we have 3, and so these 3 companies, they also don't want to lose their customers, like their paragliding brand.
Sure.
And so when I make project like this, with one prototype I go to Alensola, with the other with another project I go to the DHV, with another project I go to the ERPR. So I switch the certification companies every time, just to see if they are testing in the same mode or are they doing it different in some way. But at the end, they test it quite good and they take it quite serious also. That's really important.
I understand that the testing process, used to be quite subjective depending on the pilot, but now it's really, what do they actually do there? Because it's really like, you do this and you can't do anything for X amount of time. Is that right? Like you have an asymmetric frontal, and the test pilot is, is it still quite subjective depending on the pilot's skill, or is it pretty fair?
In the past, sometimes with some projects, I thought the testing method is quite subjective and it's not quite fair. But with the future, everybody learned, and I saw then as a responsible test pilot who says, okay, this wing is safe, let's put it to the certification and to get our certification like A or B. If you have a safe wing, if you have a safe project, it cannot fail the test. It's just if you have a wing what is quite tricky to handle, or when you make 5 collapses, 4 are okay, but there is just that one when the angle of the collapse is not the right, the wing is behaving not nice, and so the test pilot says then, okay, that's not safe. So then there can be a subjective part, but at the end I know if my glider is safe in every position in the air, I won't fail any tests, and the test will be objective. Actually, and they have cameras down there. When we make the test, I'm always on the landing field watching the pilot flying my glider. They have their stripes on the lines to measure out angles and stuff. So Um, and before I give my wing to the certification guy, I go through with him all the details. I tell him everything about the wing, and I show him videos of my test flights if he wants. So to not to put him under pressure too much, because as a certification pilot, it's also quite dangerous somehow. You fly out with a completely new product, you know nothing, and then you should go for the asymmetric collapse, and then there will be the big surprise. So also the test pilots, they start quite smooth with the maneuvers, and they progress with every flight to find out if there are mistakes or not. But if you have worked quite well in the development, there won't be any mistakes, and the glider will pass the certification without a problem.
And do the maneuvers change as the rating of the wing changes? In other words, do the test pilots have to fly different maneuvers on a D than a B?
No, the maneuvers, they are all the time the same.
Okay. So the rating comes from how the wing reacts depending on each maneuver that they have. What?
How the wing reacts when the pilot makes no reaction, yes.
And
But
how
in
many
D&D,
maneuvers are there?
the pilot is allowed to make reactions.
Okay, gotcha. And how many maneuvers are there that the wing has to go through?
About 20 maneuvers.
Okay.
Yes.
And what's the one that is the most problematic?
Is all the time, well, most of the time, it's the full accelerated side and front collapse, or sometimes the spiral. Some gliders still have the tendency to make stable spirals.
Okay.
That's the two main parts where a glider can fail. All the rest is the unaccelerated things. They are on the safe side all the time. It's just if you go full on speed bar and destroy the thing completely above your head, that's the most tricky thing.
Gosh, yes. and I would think, so I mostly only fly two-liners and comp gliders, and they're incredibly hard to frontal with, just by grabbing the A's. I understand in the testing process they put lines on the leading edge so you can just pull it, but I would imagine even that is quite subjective. I mean, depends on how hard they pull, or really that everybody kind of in tune with, okay, this is how it's done.
Well, there is a sign in the wing for the side and the front collapse. They make with some tape. They make markings on the wings, and on into this field, the test pilot has to pull the maneuver. So, for example, front collapse, there is a mark on the wing on 30% of the wing and 50%. So, and in between this two markers, the front collapse should be done. So then the test pilot makes it on the first marking, then in the middle, then in the marking behind, and then it doesn't matter how hard he pulls or something, he just have to pull the maneuver into that field, this testing field, same like with the side collapse.
Okay.
There are markers on the wings, and the test pilot has to fly the collapse exactly on these markings.
Okay, I understand.
And
okay.
From this marking, the reaction of the glider is makes the certification.
So, what would happen if, say, Icaro, you got a C that you're really excited about, and it goes to testing and it passes everything but one, and then that the one that doesn't pass puts it into a D? Would you take it back to? Would you just take it back and clean it up to still get it to a C, or would you just release it as a D?
That's actually also not my decision alone. That's the decision then also of the boss to have a compromise or not. And in the past we had a problem with a freestyle wing. All the maneuvers of this freestyle wing, they were E and A and B. Just the spiral was D because it made 2 turns more after releasing the brake. And then the company said, yes, well, let's keep it in D because it's just freestyle and it's not a big deal for this kind of flight.
Right.
But for sure, if I have a wing for E and B pilots, for sure, everything must be in the E and D category.
Sure. Okay. Gotcha. That's fascinating. Xandi, let's switch now. You teach a lot of SIV, and the last person we spoke with who talked a lot about SIV was Jockey Sanderson. I'd love to find out because you started teaching it, before the shark nose technology and the kind of pyramidal shaped line. So things were a lot different when you first started teaching it to now. I'd love to just hear the progression of SIV, kind of what you've seen change, and yeah, maybe I know it's hard to do this verbally, but maybe you could take us through kind of a typical SIV course with you. How many days, what maneuvers are you trying to get everybody through? Yeah, kind of take us through one of your SIVs.
Well, the SIV is starting on Monday and it ends on Sunday.
Okay.
And so all the good days we have in this week, we use it for flying. At least we should have 3 or 4 days in the forecast of good flying weather to start the course. If we just have 2 days of flying weather and the rest is raining or the bad wind, the course is cancelled.
Okay.
So I just carry out the course when I see my students can fly at least between 7 and 11 or 12 flights in this week. Then it makes sense for me, because just talking and sitting in the simulator but not much flying, it doesn't make a lot of sense. So if the weather is good, I meet my 14 motivated pilots in my room, and it's a totally individual training mode. That means that I have pilots who made the license last year and they start with their first collapses and little spirals, wingovers and stuff. And I have pilots who just want to get the last information from rhythmic to infinity and also some help in Sats to Hilly connections, for example. And all the rest is in between. So that means no matter which level pilot has, it can come into my course and he will get his individual trainings plan. And that's also how we start then the course. Like we make individual interviews and where we get the target of the pilots to make their training plan and to see if it's realistic, if he gets it in 1 week or not. And so we build up a training plan for every pilot. Every pilot gets his individual maneuver briefing. And also the beginners, they also like to listen if I explain actual maneuvers or stuff like this. So everybody learns a lot in quite short time, like in 6 or 7 days. And so the pilots, they are really motivated then. They have lots of information and they have a strict flight plan in my SIVs, so the pilot don't go up and they don't know which maneuver they will gonna make in the next flight. So everything is written down on plan. Everybody knows which maneuver comes on the next step. And so we go that through with 14 students. Everybody makes on a good day 3 flights a day. So, and at the end of the day, I'm really exhausted. And at 6 in the afternoon, it's the course is ending. I need to recover a few hours. And then the next day at 8 o'clock in the morning, we start again.
Okay. And what would a kind of a, take me through your kind of generic pilot, maybe a 50-hour pilot, a 70-hour, somebody who's pretty new, who's doing their first SIV, where do you hope to get them by the end of the week?
The most important things for me is that he gets the full accelerated frontal and side collapse managed, and to get the spiral totally managed.
Okay.
So that's the 2 most important things for me. If he needs to come down quite quick, he needs to know how to fly the spiral, and he needs to know how to recover the accelerated side collapse. So this is the really basics what I want to teach. For sure, wingovers are also quite important, but you cannot learn high wingovers in a few days. That's not possible. But also to get the first steps into wingover and see how the glider is behaving in this quite complex movement. But the real basics are the collapses and the spiral.
And would you hope to get them through doing any kind of full stalls or acro stalls, or is that too advanced for that first week?
Well, it depends. It's I cannot say if this is for all pilots, but more or less the younger pilots, the younger generation, they learn quite fast and they have good progression. And with some of them, we also make really nice flyback, tail slides, and little dynamic stalls also in the first week of the SIV. And others who are a bit older and don't have this fitness also to make everyday free flights. They are tired also after 1 or 2 flights. They want to have a break. So depending on this level, the pilot learns, or the younger pilots, they learn more than the older generation. For sure. I also see I get older. I don't have the energy anymore like I had 20 years ago during the day. It's changing a bit with the time.
What maneuvers did you used to teach back in the kind of mid 2000s that you don't teach now? Are there any things that aren't relevant anymore?
I teach some maneuvers. I teach them different. But there is not a maneuver where I say I don't do it today anymore. If the owner manual says every maneuver is okay, for sure we have some wings where they say B stall is not quite good, when you can read it in the description of the wing. But all the rest, I teach for sure the maneuvers in a different way, because also the wings and the constructions changed. But the maneuvers, they are the same like in 2000 also.
Okay. And is SIV not, to me, I've had this attitude for years that, if you're flying cross country, you're just taking way too much risk with your life if you don't do very regular SIV. And so I was surprised to hear from Jockey, who, like yourself, teaches SIV all the time and has made all the videos, and I think is a terrific SIV instructor. He didn't actually agree with that. He really felt like, yes, in an ideal world, it's important for everybody, but it's not for everyone. That for some people, it's just they can still enjoy flying and they can still be a good pilot and not do SIV because maybe it's just too traumatic or too scary. Well, what's your opinion on that?
That's also, I see also this development, but also more in this older flying generation. So I know 10 or 15 or 20 years ago, the full stall was not a maneuver. It was just a horrible thing. What can happen in the air and it's shaking. And so 20 years ago, my friends, nobody wanted to make full stall or something. It's just now this new generation now, they grow up with this thing, and it's totally different nowadays. The young generation, at first, they learn to fly maneuvers, and then they learn how to take off and land, and then they learn how to thermal. And actually, that will be a completely different flying generation than the older guys who fly since more than 20 years. They never visit any SIV, they never made any full stall, but they are still flying also really, really big distances. But for me, this is quite a risky thing, because if I would fly with an attitude like, okay, I'm really high, I'm fully on speed bar, but now if something happens, I don't have a plan what to do. Just maybe throwing the risk. But this is a big thrill also for me.
Yeah, absolutely. It is for everybody. Okay. Well, then
there's still a lot of people around there who will never make a full stall, but for sure they will fly for more than 10 years in the future and make their flights like all the time.
So what's your, now instead of the 50 to 70 hour pilot, maybe you have the 200 or 250 hour pilot who's maybe coming to you to learn rhythmic sats and helicos and maybe some more advanced stuff. What do you like to see in pilots that I don't know if you have this term there, you probably do, but we call it intermediate syndrome, so you have somebody who, and we talk about that a lot on this show because I find it pretty fascinating, but you've gotten through the beginner stuff, you've gotten through the the time where you have no idea what you don't know, and now you know enough to be dangerous, and you're kind of pushing it, and you're trying to learn new things. What's your advice? What do you see in that pilot that makes you a little bit nervous, and how do you rectify it? How do you take me through that pilot a little bit?
Yeah, that's also, I needed to make my experience also with that in the last 10, 15 years of making SIVs. In the beginning, I wanted to give the pilot everything what I knew in the fastest way of progression. But I also saw that sometimes it's too much for the pilots. They want too much, and they don't see their own limits and go much more over their own limits, and then it can get quite dangerous in very short time. So today it's quite important for these pilots to stay more with the basic stuff to get it 100% managed and then go to the next level. Some pilots, they don't want to spend lots of time in training for just a simple helico. They want to make twisted heli connections and this and that. But it's better to focus on the basic stuff until you have it 100%, and then you can get to the next step. And for that, you need much time. And the pilots, they don't wanna they wanna be champion in 1-2 years, but not in 10 years. So that's sometimes their motivation. That the faster the progression, the better it is. But the speech, there are lots of young and good pilots around, but there are not a lot of good old pilots around.
Yeah, no bold old pilots. Yeah, exactly. What maneuver do you like to see a pilot really, really have down? In other words, a maneuver that's going to translate into success, whether that be cross country, thermaling, or just pure safety.
Well, I think there are two types of maneuvers. What makes a good skilled pilot? It's full stall and wing overs.
Okay.
It's like when you are able to maneuver your glider through these two maneuvers in a perfect harmonic way, you have really understood this quite difficult pendulum, actually, what we have with our paraglider, with this deep weight down there as a pilot. So actually it's a big pendulum, and you need to understand this. And with wing overs and stalls, you really can give good basics for have lots of successful and nice flights. And my students, if they make nice stalls and wing overs, I'm really happy with them, because I know how hard it is in the beginning to learn nice wing overs and stalls.
I think they're so, in some ways, underappreciated how difficult a really good wing over really does say that you're a pretty good pilot, isn't it? I mean, it's you can't just get lucky on a wing over. You really have to understand it. There's a lot going on there, and when you get it, it's magical. It's a beautiful maneuver. Now let's talk about kind of the expert, the halo syndrome. The pilots that are 1,000 hours plus, have a lot of experience. They come to you because they're having trouble nailing the infinite or something. What's a kind of a common problem you see at that level, and how do you deal with that pilot?
In the past, pilots were coming to me and said, "Xandi, I do so nice rhythmic sats, but as soon as I get really straight, close to infinity, my brain says no, and then I stop the glider. So I just need you and your voice under my helmet to go through this difficult point, and then I will manage the infinity tumbling. Xandi, can we make 2-3 flights?" And in the beginning, I did it because I thought, okay, my voice will be stronger than his brain, and I can get him into this infinity maneuver. But I had it then 3 times where the pilots had a stronger brain than my voice. And so they made a little step forward. So they came maybe from 170 to 175 degrees, but then their brain was again stronger. The blockade came again, and they stopped it in a really baddest moment you can stop, and they felt quite close into it, but they felt close by the canopy, and thank God nothing happened. They threw the rescue and landed in the water. Everything was safe. But then I thought, okay, it's not like flying with a radio controlled airplane, because there I have the commands all the time. It's still this communication system, what can have a failure sometime, as soon as the pilot starts to think again, when he has his fears in that maneuver. Nowadays, I just teach rhythmic anymore to 170 degrees, and I tell to the pilots, the infinity, my friend, you have to work out on your own. I cannot go through with you on the voice, because I know what can happen. And actually, since all the SIVs and Icaro courses I made, I had no accidents at all, and I want to keep it like this. And if I continue with motivating pilots to go from rhythmic to infinite just with my voice, the risk is too big, actually. And maybe sometimes there are some students where I can help, and they get the infinity in short time, and that's good. But with the experience also I made, that there are lots of pilots out there who think, I buy Xandi for one day, I just need a few words for him, and then I have the infinity faster than the others. But that's the wrong attitude. And with that way of thinking, you won't get quite far. So especially with this quite technical and dangerous thing, the pilots need to take their time and they have to make this mental training stuff and fight against their fear to let the glider shoot when it has energy. And you just can do it by really serious and safe training. And you cannot force it, this maneuver.
Xandi, you've been at this game a long time. I'm sure you've seen too many accidents, as we all have. What would be your advice? I always ask this question. If you could look back to your 50-hour self, what advice do you wish you would have taken, or do you wish you would have gotten? But being an instructor and you've done all this instructing, what would be the advice you'd want to pass on to the listeners, to help them, be one of the older pilots that hasn't had an accident? What are the kind of the common threads or the themes that you see that lead to mistakes?
Yeah, the advice would be, don't play too much. We should have fun in this sport. Our sport should be safe, and we are just a guest up there when we are flying, and we should never start to play unserious things with the nature or with our glider. When we want to make something, we should prepare everything and ourselves quite good for a new thing, and we shouldn't do it in a quite risky way. So safety is cool, I think. Safety first. And we all know everybody can enter a maneuver. It's no problem to enter a maneuver. It's just a question, can you also exit the maneuver? So every new thing, what you want to learn or need to do, is it a cross-country flight or is it a maneuver? Prepare yourself 100%. Don't fly out, think nothing, and just pull. Just prepare 100%. Ask the pros, read books, watch videos, make mental training. Prepare everything. You need to have a plan A, but also a plan B, and maybe also a plan C if plan A and B doesn't work. And with that preparation, it should work.
That's very applicable to cross country, obviously, too. I hope listeners put that together. I'm sure they did. But okay, great advice. If someone wanted to tackle acro, and it's quite tricky for us here in the States because we don't have a lot of water to train over. There's a few spots, but I know where you live there in Gerlitzen. We flew by it in the X-Alps down near Villach there. It's just ideal. You've got a gondola, you got a big lake, you got a lot of height. But how would somebody, I know the guys who really train hard will go to a place like Organia and train over the dirt because you can just reload. You can get so much more time than you can at, say, a Garda or Gerlitzen. But if if when younger, the younger generation comes to you and wants to learn, all of it, they want to get, they're a pretty new pilot, but they're totally addicted to acro. What would you suggest for that pilot in terms of taking that on? What are the steps? And, is it, how much of that should be done with an instructor, with somebody like you on the radio talking to them?
Well, it depends. There are guys who don't need an instructor at all, and they have so good reflexes. And nowadays, the book is out, the acro knowledge is on Just Acro and on YouTube and everywhere. So actually, if you know how a glider is working, you can also go through the internet and book and stuff, and you can try it on your own also. It's not a problem. I learned acro and the maneuvers completely on my own. There was nobody who told me how to do it. So I went through everything and found the best way out how to manage the maneuver. That's the one thing. And there are also pilots, because this life is quite expensive somehow if you book courses, if you travel around, if you make this and that. And this young generation, they are really motivated to fly, but they don't have this budget actually to pay all that stuff. And Gerlitzen is one of the cheapest places for flying acro over the water. So we have lots of pilots there who are totally motivated, but they don't really have the money to make courses and stuff. But we have a nice community there where the older, the more experienced guys, they take the younger ones beside and show them everything. That's also what I spread out there on this flying site, Gerlitzen. I say to the experienced ones, take the younger ones, explain them everything, and don't make the hero, just explain them everything and they will come further. And that's a quite good system, what's working there. Everybody helps the other one. It's a quite good community. And so at the end, the pilot at least has to ask himself, what does he want to do? Does he want, is it his biggest target to make the first place in the World Cup one time, or does he want just to make a few nice, good maneuvers? And if you want to compete in the World Cup, for sure, you need to train. If you start from zero, at least 1, 2, really motivated guys leave Gerlitzen after 2 years already and go to Agania and continue there. But actually, yes, you will see where you are when you spend some years in training, like 4, 6, 5 years of training acro quite hard, and you are ready for competition. Then you have made a really, really big step and experience if you've survived this 3 or 4 or 5 years, because lots of them they stop in the middle of the progression because they have a bad accident, they have bad experience or whatever. So if 100 motivated pilots come to Gerlitzen, maybe 20 or 30 continue in a few years in Agania, but the rest has seen how much time and energy and motivation it costs to go through this whole procedure to be a good acro pilot. And then they see, okay, they have a job, they have a family maybe, or they have also a normal life beside, so there is no much time for training.
Yeah, it's a young man's game, isn't it? Where I'm not nearly as familiar with acro wings, but in cross country wings, there was this huge jump in 2009 that literally in some ways kind of made a 100-mile flight was kind of a big deal, and then it just overnight it was like 200 miles, a big deal. Has there been the same kind of jump in acro wings, and then also where do you see both wings going? And with your development in Icaro, is it do you see another big jump like that coming down the pipeline?
Well, also after the infinity tumbling, we thought, okay, now we have reached the end, and what will come next now, And I see lots of potential also in the future because the materials are changing. And with the materials, also our gliders are changing, and with new gliders, we can make also new maneuvers. We made lots of experiments with prototypes in the past, like with We flew with completely closed canopies, like small pieces where the air can flow in, but it will never can flow out. And with these wings, you have lots of performance in some maneuvers, but for other maneuvers, it doesn't work at all. But we see some possibilities for the future. And I wouldn't say that there is an end. I'm sure there will another big wave coming in the next 3 or 4 years with new inventions of the companies, with for sure better gliding performance and also maybe better safety, passive safety, both in cross country and also in acro flying. It's not over. No.
Well, that's a perfect.
Paragliding is quite young. It's 20 or 30 years right now, isn't it?
Yeah, exactly.
It began in 85 or something.
It's too early to make. It's too early to say. Oh yeah, it's all been done, isn't it? It's fascinating.
Yes.
I think it feels like we're just getting started.
Yes.
Well, Xandi, that's a great place to end. I think that leaves us thinking good thoughts about the future. Is there anything else you want to add, maybe about your company or about your SIVs before we close, or any other? You've given some great advice. Any last advice to our listeners, and then and before we close, and then I look forward to doing some flying with you this next spring. I'm going to be over in Gerlitzen doing some training, so I'm quite excited about that.
That will be awesome. Yeah, but you told it already. Well, it's not an advice, it's an invitation for all the pilots out there. Come to Gerlitzen, come to my Flieger base, enjoy the cool atmosphere we have on the landing place and a few cool drinks, and the good vibes are already there. So because I always, I visited other countries a lot in the past, and now I got based there on Gerlitzen. I have a beautiful place, and every pilot who comes from another country is really welcome at us. And we have really great times there.
Yeah, it's an awesome place. I have to tell you a quick little story about my most recent. I've flown Gerlitzen quite a bit, but during the X Alps this year, I had a really bad third day going into Slovenia, and anyway, didn't get to the turn point, got behind some really bad weather, and the next day was pretty good. It ended up ODing later in the day quite violently. It was a monster day, but just as I was coming across from the south side and coming across the valley, I don't know what that valley name is, but basically crossed onto the Gerlitzen side, and I was just down maybe 5 or 6 kilometers from the launch, the kind of standard launch there at Gerlitzen, and the sky was going ballistic, so I top landed real quick. It was really gray and just about to rain, and I top landed near some little houses, and probably maybe 200 meters higher than the Gerlitzen launch, so I was set up really well for a relaunch, which I never got to do because the day just totally deteriorated. But I landed near this car, and just as it started drizzling a little bit, so it was perfect timing. And this wonderful lady came out. She and her family were renting a little place there. It was like an Airbnb kind of thing. And she came out and, of course, curious, what in the world are you doing here? No one's ever landed here. And they invited me in and gave me some, big jug of cranberry juice. Of course, they wanted to give me beer, but I was still racing, so I didn't take her up on the beer. But, this huge plate of salami and cheese and all this stuff. It was one of the highlights of the race, actually. I mean, of course, I would have wanted to have been flying, but it's such a friendly area. It's just an amazing place to go. So yeah, I would encourage everybody to get out to Austria and fly that cool zone. Awesome triangle place, and then you've got such a good spot for acro. But cool. Well, Xandi, thanks so much again. I really appreciate your time. That was a lot of fun, and I look forward to flying with you here in a few months.
Thank you also, and also looking forward to meeting you there in spring, and enjoy some nice air time together. Thank you.
Thank you. Cheers, bud. If you're getting something out of this podcast, I encourage you to support us. This is a listener-supported show. All we ask for is $1 a show, but it shouldn't be a stretch. If that's a stretch, if that's cutting into your Starbucks in the morning, that is not what this is supposed to be. It's free. It's supposed to be free, and it will always be free. But if you can support us financially, awesome. You can do that through cloudbasemayhem.com, our website, or through Patreon, patreon.com/ facebook.com/cloud-based mayhem. You'll find all kinds of cool like rewards and stuff, and where you can just set it and forget it on that site. But you can also support us by just posting on Facebook or spreading the news or talking about it on the way up to launch, following my stuff on Facebook or Instagram. That's the kind of stuff, that's ways that I can convert into currency through my sponsors. So lots of different ways to support us. What this is all about is just spreading the knowledge, spreading the love, and making us all safer and fly farther. So enjoy, thank you, and we'll see you on the next show. Cheers.